So I would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening for the South Park Master Plan meeting. A few housekeeping items before we get started. When you joined, you had heard that you were in listen only mode. You cannot unmute yourself, but during public comment times, I can unmute you. I would like you to use the raise your hand function, which is a little hand icon on your screen, to indicate to me that you would like to speak, and then I could unmute you for you to do so. Also, if you do not have a microphone on your device that you're using, you could use the questions tool to send a question to us. It's the question mark icon. You could just type it in and send it along, and during public comment, I will read those questions out loud to the panelists. Also, there is a presentation for tonight. If you're on a phone or a tablet, your screen will usually default to who's speaking, so you might need to swipe to get to the point where you could see the presentation also. And now I'll turn things over to our Executive Director, Gail Mountcastle, to start the meeting.
Thank you, Margaret. Welcome, everyone. As Margaret mentioned, I'm Gail Mountcastle, and I am the Executive Director of the Park District. Thank you so much for joining us on this beautiful evening to give your input on the South Park Master Plan and the grant submission. I think we have a record number in the audience, so we're thrilled that everybody is so interested in this park and plan. I wanted to run through some introductions and a little background before we get into the meat of the presentation. First and foremost, I wanted to introduce a couple of our commissioners that are on this evening. Jennifer LeDuc, who is our Board of Park Commissioner President, and Matt Coyne, who is our Board of Park Commissioners. He is our Recreation Liaison on the board. Several staff are on the Park District Planning team. The ones that are here tonight include Terry Wolf, Superintendent of Buildings and Grounds, April Armour, Superintendent of Recreation, Sandra DeAngelis, Superintendent of Finance, Jennifer Meunier, Project Manager, Margaret Holler, Marketing and Public Relations Director, and I believe that is it. We've got a couple other staff that are on the planning team that are not here this evening. With Upland Design is Liz Defoe, and she is the Senior Landscape Architect, and Tom Dvorak, who is our Landscape Architect as well. So a little background before we get started. The Board of Park Commissioners in May of 2022 approved an agreement with Upland Design to complete a master plan for South Park. So South Park is one of our community parks, and that is a definition we use when it serves a larger community and it's not just serving one neighborhood and a smaller park. We have been completing master plans for our larger community parks, most recently Oakton, hopefully everybody's heard about that, and Hinckley Park. So the goal is to not just look at our current needs, but a plan for the future. So we're placing things in the right spaces and just looking globally at the plan. So that when we're looking at future and we talk about that, it's very important that we point out that we don't currently have the funding for the future items in our plan that you will see. So the timeline and why this has come up so quickly, good news is that we were informed of the latest OSLED grant opportunity, and that has a deadline of September 30th, which is a very quick turnaround for us. And OSLED is the Open Space Land and Development Grant that we have received in the past for other parks. Our most recently, Hinckley and Woodland Park, we received $400,000 for those parks. So it's important to have a plan in place to prepare for when these grants become available. They have raised the matching amount to $600,000, another piece of good news. And so the Park District has to match that other $600,000 at the minimum. Now, $600,000 is the most you can get for the grants. And so the time frame, accelerated us, our whole schedule for our master planning. We will have opportunities for master planning in the future if we don't get quite there, but the grant elements have to be decided on quickly. And so the staff team and the architects have been meeting. We're going to meet with the community, and then the board will review options and take your input from this evening and other public input we get. So of course, the public input is extremely important. We want it's going to be interactive tonight. It's going to be a presentation, but there will be time for interaction. We have incorporated amenities that reflect input from past input surveys and our overall district master plan, which we did, about 9 or 10 years ago. And so that pointed out all the things that they recommended, the architects at that point, that we include in certain parks. So the grant submission has to have 5 allowable recreation amenities, and we're going to run through those to be a viable project, the ones that we are recommending. The board will make the final decision on the grant submittal at the September 15th board meeting. And I believe those are the points I wanted to point out. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Liz from Upland Design, and we will all be here for questions throughout and at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gail. As was mentioned, really here we're looking at our potential master plan. I just wanted to kind of cover, we're going to let you guys know we're going to go through our proposed OSLED amenities, then some of those future amenities, and then open it up for some questions at the end. So just to make sure everybody is aware of the existing conditions out at South Park, we've got the existing playground and wading pool up in the northwest corner, existing rec center with a parking lot, the open field that's currently being used for football and lacrosse and ice rinks in the winter. We've got the tennis courts in the south end, and of course, a nice baseball field here. All right, so here's the proposed master plan, and where I'm showing a lot of the existing amenities I just mentioned, and then I'm going to go through step by step with some enlargements here, the proposed improvements for OSLAD. So one of the first amenities that was noted for improvement is the playground. So the playground we're proposing to keep in the same location, but have new fencing, new play equipment, and new surfacing, which would include poured-in-place surfacing, which is something the Park District is looking to do at their community-sized parks. And one thing to note, because we are on a quick turnaround here, we're proposing playground improvements, but the actual playground would be selected as part of that future community engagement process. So we don't need to decide all of those things right now. And then one of the other amenities that was very much shared with us is the need for a large shelter and some restrooms close to the wading pool and playground area. And so we're showing here a combination structure that would have a shelter with picnic tables at the one end. You can see here as an example down at the bottom, as well as restrooms. And here we're showing it located centrally to serve not only the playground and wading pool, but also the seasonal ice rink, which we have shown here, and the football and lacrosse field. This dash line you see here is just for reference to show that we did take into consideration the size of a football field to make sure that we're kind of staying clear to that, and we're tucking it up under next to the existing trees. We are also proposing some pathway connections to the existing parking and to the playground to the north there. And then next, one of the nice big features of the park, as I mentioned, was the tennis courts. So as part of the OSLED, we're proposing to renovate the existing tennis with all new asphalt surfacing, new color coat, and new fencing. As you will see, currently there are 4 tennis courts, and we are proposing to replace 3 of the tennis courts, and at the last court, switching that to create 2 pickleball courts with fencing in between, so that those can play with at the same time with some fencing to protect ball rolling and stuff between the 2 courts. So that would be in the existing footprint of the tennis court as it now exists. And then finally, the last element is really to create a walking loop. And this will come up here from the parking lot, connect to the baseball field, and create accessible access to the dugouts and the bleacher areas for the baseball, and then connect down where the existing batting cages are here. So the pathways will connect to that, as well as the renovated tennis courts down to the sidewalk at Devon and back to the recreation facility. And sorry, lastly, I forgot to mention, we do want to acknowledge that as part of these improvements, we're going to have to look at detention. One of the ways we would do that is with a rain garden. This is a proposed location of where that could fit. We would include interpretive signage to make sure that, really trying to capture educational abilities here as we also address stormwater. And this is the existing shelter that's directly south of the recreation center right now, and we would look at renovating that and the landscape around. So it really works with the new improvements that we're proposing. So in summary, just to go back to the overall plan, the areas that I have highlighted here in red are the overall amenities that we would propose, and as Gail said, really trying to hit that five amenities. So pickleball, tennis, our shelter. We did add a little bit of extra paving at the shelter that could be used for activities like yoga classes or group gatherings there, and then as well as the playground. All right, so those are the proposed OSLAD amenities. And before we open it up to questions, you guys are probably wondering what some of these other dashed lines and areas are. So I just want to talk through those really fast. So some of the other areas that we know that could be areas of improvement to look at in the future are highlighted here. One of them is the wading pool, to do renovations to the wading pool, possible expansions. So we really want to get everybody's input on what you guys think of that and the priority of that. We also acknowledge in the future the parking lot will have to be renovated. So that is highlighted here. And then as our tennis and pickleball communities keep expanding, we also wanted to highlight a potential location for expanding the courts. So that is really what this area is here. It is not decided what would go there, but definitely some space we could build into. And then another possible future amenity could be an additional shelter. This one up here by the playground wading pool does a really great job of serving these high use amenities over in the northwest corner, and the practice fields and seasonal ice rinks. But it would we are also looking at a possible shelter to service the baseball and tennis courts and pickleball courts over here. So those are a couple other of the future amenities. So as I go back to looking at the overall master plan, we are going to open up to polls. Unless there's anything you guys in the Park District want to add before we start launching that. So the first question that we want to add is really getting into the OSLAD grant elements. And I am going to launch that poll, hoping that it is all sharing. And the question is, of the items that we are proposing or we're currently showing included as the OSLAD grant, what's the highest priority that you would like to see completed? We want to make sure that we are addressing everybody's high priorities. And we will give everybody a couple minutes to complete that. We've got a big group here, so we want to make sure and give everybody an opportunity. Right. So give it just a couple more seconds here. Looks like most of you guys have voted. All right. Now, Margaret, can I share the responses? I think it's my next question.
I thought you could.
All right, well, I'm gonna, last chance to vote. I'm gonna close it here. All right. And yep, I sure can share. All right. So I'm hoping everybody can see the results. It looks like 35% was the high priority of the playground. The shelter and tennis courts were kind of tied for second place, with the walking path being last. And just a few of you out there must be pickleball players. All right. I've got 2 other questions, and then we can open up for comments. Does that sound good? Right. So the next question is, do you guys agree with the items that we're including in the grant? Again, we want to make sure that we're hitting the highest priority elements. So this is a yes or no question, but please, if we will open up the chats so we can have answer any other questions. All right, I think you guys are getting better at this voting. It's coming in a little faster. You know, new systems are always a little daunting. Right. All right, it looks like most of you have voted. Last chance to get in that yes or no vote. And this is about the OSLED items. All right, I'm gonna close the poll and share. All right, so overwhelming, it looks like everybody at the meeting agrees that we are on the right track with the OSLED elements. That is great to hear. Thank you guys so much for sharing that. All right, so the next question that is going to be coming everybody's way is about the future items. So as I mentioned, several amenities we talked about, I showed it at the end, were about future. And so here we're looking at these amenities, what are you guys' highest priority? So as funding becomes available, which ones of these would you like to see completed first? I feel like during these pollings, we need music to play, like Jeopardy. All right, so it looks like we've got just about everybody voting. I'll give everybody another second or two. Last chance to get your vote in. Right, close that and share. All right, so as you guys can see here, it looks like wading pool expansion is #1 priority identified tonight, 44%. The second one would be additional courts, and third, additional shelter over by the courts and baseball And the last parking lot renovation, which I'm not surprised, it's usually not high on people's priority, but we do acknowledge that it needs to be done. A few of you guys did say none of these, so we'd love to hear whether in the chat or if you guys want to raise your hand and hear what else you guys see as a future priority. And with that, I'm going to go back to the overall master plan.
Okay, Liz, I do have a couple of comments that have come through on the questions tool. So I'm going to start there. And in the meantime, if anybody else wants to be unmuted for public comment, they could start raising their hands and then I'll start going through those. We do have Benjamin who asked, has there been any discussion for improving the baseball field?
Terry, do you want to take that one?
We've actually had some recent renovations and improvements to the baseball field, including some improved public announcement systems, improved dugouts, better access to the fields. We've recently done some regrading and changing how those fields, the surfacing of those materials, and we do work very closely with our baseball affiliate in town. So we did not have any specific discussions about this other than the improved pathways and accessibilities that would circle this as part of the pathway system. But if you had any specific feedback, I'd be interested to hear it.
And my next one is from Allison. And she said, I think 4 tennis courts are ideal and the court expansion area could be used for pickleball. That was a comment. We also just got another comment from Robert who also said, hello, thank you for your time tonight. The 4 courts are already constantly busy. Any consideration to improving the 4 existing courts and adding pickleball at a different location at another time? So that was another comment. Then we have from Lee, who's actually talking about the parking lot. I know Liz mentioned that it's usually not a highlight for people, but she asked, has there been any discussion about permeable pavers in the parking lot? And also EV charging consideration would be a nice amenity as more people drive electric vehicles. So did somebody want to answer about the parking lot?
Yeah, I can answer that. We have not recently given any discussion to that. We do look at that at our various sites and projects when we're considering parking lot improvements. We do have some challenges with permeability and credits that the city offers for permeable pavers, but that is something that we always look at and consider to determine if it makes sense for that particular site and that project. As a whole, we have not discussed at this location EV charging stations, but I have begun some conversations with some of my staff about considering that on future projects. So that's a great suggestion for this one. Thank you.
And from Jim, we have, why no focus on the building being upgraded or replaced?
I can take this. We did talk about the building. We have put some funding into upgrading, things in the building in the past few years, the blinds, the flooring. It is even though it's an older building, it's structurally sound. We have had that reviewed. And it is heavily used. And for at least for the grant process, but it certainly can be an open discussion for the master plan, but for the grant process, we get credits and can apply for the grant funding for outdoor recreational amenities. So we'll certainly take that into consideration, as we move forward on the master plan.
Okay. From Josh, we have, given the weekend lack of availability at Hinckley due to Park Ridge Park District affiliates, why are you reducing the number of tennis courts? And then we also have from Trisha, I would echo the comments that the 4 tennis courts are consistently full and it would be less than ideal to eliminate court. I agree with the idea of adding pickleball courts in the next expansion phase. Any comments?
I could probably take this one. It's a constant balance, and we've had this, of course, this conversation a lot with the tennis and pickleball, and we respect and support both of those sports. As many people know, there's courts being built at Woodland, and as we build them, we are hearing, from other communities and other just residents about more pickleball courts, because it is the fastest growing and has been the fastest growing adult sport in the country. We do have 17 tennis courts. We just, we're in the final phases of renovating JC. We renovated Hinckley. The point is well taken about the affiliates, utilizing Hinckley a lot. With the Park Ridge Public Schools, we have a total of 37 courts, and we have had conversations with them about letting, the public using those courts at, specifically at Main East, and those are available, but duly noted. And, it's one of the things we went back and forth with, so that your input will be taken into consideration.
Okay, I'm going to jump to some of the people who have their hand raised. So I'm going to James Simmons first. James, I unmuted you, so now you could unmute yourself to speak. James, you need to unmute yourself. Okay. You must be having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to jump to the next person. Mike Lushniak, I've unmuted you, so you could unmute yourself to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So first of all, I think the plan is awesome. Looks like a great project. The two recommendations I would have would be that path that's running along the tennis courts going to the sidewalk on Devon, potentially moving that to the other side of the tennis courts. I guess that would be the west side, so that it comes up and kind of connects to all the other paths in the center of the park, as opposed to kind of being more like in the back of that area where at night it's kind of dark. And then my second thought would just be echoing, someone mentioned building upgrades. I agree, it's a great building. My kids and I use it a lot, but maybe just some superficial, low cost upgrades to the lobby and the bathrooms would be my only recommendation there as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next I'm going to Nancy Krotos. We can hear you. Oh, you just.
Yes, hi. I live on Prospect, and Terry and I have worked together in the past to try to resolve the lighting issues, the debacle that happened a few years ago. I'm still really concerned about the light pollution. Our house and the houses 4 north of us are still really impacted by the lights that are at the park. And amazingly enough, the tennis court lights now shine over Walgreens and also impact our houses to the point where I now pull down 2 blinds every night. And I know the old, you don't live near a park if you don't want to deal with the stuff, but that lighting wasn't here when we moved in 36 years ago. So I'm really concerned about how the lights are going to shake down in the future, and whether there's going to be any community input into how bright they are, how long they can stay on, because right now the public still has access with a secret code to the baseball field, and those lights are on way past 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I've just gotten tired of complaining about it. I've called security, I've talked to Terry. I don't know what else I can say. I'm not the only one that feels this way. I just represent my neighbors as well. So I think we need to be cognizant of how high those lights are at the tennis courts if you're going to be redoing things, and take a look at how it impacts everyone who has houses that face that area, and also the houses that are on Cumberland and also on Devon. That's it.
Thank you, Nancy. I'll look into some of those comments that you made again about the timing because they shouldn't be on that late. So my apologies.
Okay.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to Robert Ryan.
Hi, this is Bob Ryan. I'm the president of the Park Ridge Pickleball Club, and I wanted to speak tonight because I saw there was a master plan discussion, and to me, a master plan is where we want to be in 3 to 5 years. And South Park has a lot of things going for it in terms of existing courts, no neighbors close for pickleball, parking, and it's just an ideal space for more pickleball. Pickleball in Park Ridge continues to grow. The pickleball club affiliates has gone from 86 people last year to 117 right now, 30 people in less than a year. A lot of these people play 5 times a week. My house is the first house south of Devon, in fact, on Brophy, which is right across the street basically. Those courts are not full. Tennis courts are not full all the time. I can tell you that because we pull out of Brophy and it's right there. But I know the quite the awkward time because the Woodland Park renovation is not done. We don't have those courts yet. But there is lots of growing need and demand for more pickleball time in courts. We have 350 people in the Park Ridge Pickleball Club Facebook group. There is a pickleball club at Maine South. They have no pickleball courts outside of Maine South. They have there are also tennis players, of course, at Maine South, but they have tennis courts there. None of the kids want to be in a club with 65-year-olds. So we have no high schoolers in our pickleball club, but we do get high schoolers playing in the pickleball club. It really is a rapidly changing sport. Probably all heard Serena Williams is retiring from tennis. She's agreed to become a pickleball ambassador, as has Roger Federer. So I think there'll be a whole new generation of people playing pickleball. We as a club offer free pickleball 1-on-1 classes for beginners. We haven't had enough this year because we don't have court time. And the weather hasn't cooperated. But when we offer these classes, we teach 8 or 12 people, and then they tell their neighbors. And that I expect we will have 250 pickleball club affiliates within a couple of years. I think the tennis folks have about 320 right now. So I think we will exceed tennis in terms of popularity very soon. Thank you all very much for giving us a chance to talk and do the plan. I didn't realize it was going to be a poll tonight. I could have had 117 people on voting, so it's a little bit of, they told me I should speak and represent the club and such. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to Susan Anns.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Just a couple things. And I'm thrilled that we have so many tennis and pickleball enthusiasts in Park Ridge. But my question is, was there ever any discussion about adding basketball court? I feel like we have way more, it might be just my perception, but way more tennis than we do basketball courts. And I mean, on tennis courts, you could fit like 4 people, right? Play tennis together. Basketball, we could get big crowds of people, so more people would use it. And I think we need more stuff for our older kids. They're crowding around uptown, and if they had something else to do and a place to do it in, they might go, excuse me, and play at South Park if there were basketball courts there. So I'm probably the odd person out, but I would recommend taking out a tennis court and putting a basketball court in there. Or like other people have said about the building itself, maybe putting some pool tables in there. Or what about like a tiny mini golf course that would be used by all ages? Something like that. That's all.
Thank you. James Simmons, let's try again. Oh, I think you just typed in. Oh, but I think you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
We can.
All right, excellent. So I'll go through kind of clockwise. The playground, my kids use that regularly, and keeping it little kid friendly is awesome. But the bees have been an ongoing issue in the sandbox. Having that addressed would be nice. The wading pool, we use that regularly as well. My kids 2, 4, and 6 all love it. So expansion of that or continued what you have is great. We haven't used the ice skating rinks, but I see them constantly used, so that would be great. My kids do gymnastics and karate in the building. It does get a little warm in there, so maybe there's some sort of budget for an HVAC upgrade to be considered. And then tennis courts, I see those used all the time, so reducing them, again, like a lot of people have said, might be an issue. I do understand the increased demand for pickleball, but I've been out there to play tennis, and it's hard to get a court with 4 out there, and they do need to be updated a little bit. No experience with the baseball field personally, but I think you guys are doing a great job and looking to update things, and I appreciate the call tonight.
Thank you. Susan Ann's, who commented about the basketball discussion, she's asking, was there any discussion about basketball? Will somebody like to answer that?
That had not yet come up as a topic for this location, so I would definitely appreciate you bringing it up and putting it out there. As Gail mentioned at the beginning, we've looked at a lot of things that we've heard from various other surveys as a kind of a starting point for entities here, but that's one of the reasons why we have meetings like this, is so that we can gather additional feedback and make sure that we're not missing things that we hadn't thought of. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Terry. So now I'm going to jump back to some of the questions that were typed in, questions and comments. Diane had written, the current condition of the playground is poor. What plans are there to keep the park up? It is overgrown and looks somewhat abandoned.
Thanks, Diane. Yeah, we've actually had we're backlogged on some of our playground replacements, but as you may have seen in some of our parks recently, we've been making that a priority. In fact, we've been replacing about one a year over the past several years. In fact, when we've done these playground renovations, we've been getting a lot of great feedback from everybody, and we've been working diligently to keep everything well maintained. As you can imagine, at some point they get to a point of deterioration and age where that does become a real challenge, and that's exactly why they are in need of replacement, which is why South Park was identified as one for replacement now.
I think to add, I think that was the comment before about the sand and the bees. I believe our plan is to remove that sand area because that is the attraction to the bees, that sand area. Terry, you can confirm that.
Yeah, we've seen in our area over the last number of years that any area that we have with sand, it becomes a real challenge for bees. That's an easy spot for them to nest, and there's a newer type of a wasp, a cicada killer wasp, that really gravitates towards those areas and utilize those for nesting. So that is, we've been removing sand from all of our playgrounds going forward.
Terry, one of the things that Diane had commented on is the overgrown part of it. I think maybe she's referring to the fence. And it was interesting what you told us when we walked that property. So maybe you can share what you told us about the fence. And
yeah. So that there is a fence buried in there and some of that overgrowth. And while it is overgrown, that the age of that fence is so old, and the posts have rotted away so much that when I went there with my staff a number of years ago and we looked at the idea of removing some of that overgrowth, we quickly realized that if we did that, the fencing would be coming down with it at the same time. So that overgrowth is actually holding up the fencing material currently. So as part of this plan, we've already talked about the need to remove all that overgrowth and replace all the new fencing with new fencing. So you'll see a much different situation. And some of that was just some, old landscaping and the way that was planned previously that just, lent itself to allow that to happen. So.
I have a comment from Lauren. She asks, can you give more details regarding the walking path? Can it circle around the park and not just in the high traffic area for walking and exercise? Somebody go over the walking path again.
Yeah, I can discuss it. One of the things is that's nice about South Park is there is an accessible sidewalk. So we were trying to be really thoughtful of the area on the west side that's currently being used as football and lacrosse practice field, that it is, as you can see by this dash line here, it is pretty tight along, and there's with the existing fence, that's this kind of undulating line around here. So that was one of the reasons that we chose to kind of add paths where we could improve accessibility to amenities, but not take up some kind of valuable recreation space with, interrupting that with paths, but it's definitely something we could take a look at.
I think, one of the other, goals here that and something that we try to accomplish where we can at parks is to utilize existing, hardscape infrastructure where available so that we're not, duplicating costs or adding more hardscapes that decrease the permeability of the ground and increases, flooding problems in town as well. So, in these situations, we're also looking to, connect to those sidewalks as kind of part of the continuation and the completion of the loop around the park. So, we kind of look to those areas when we can as a budget saving tool as well, just so we're being responsible with everyone's tax dollars.
I do have another comment from Diane about that walking path, and she's concerned about the walking path around the baseball field as there is little room on the third base side.
It is, I will acknowledge it is tight in there for sure. So we will be working around the existing fences as best we can to continue that accessibility.
Thank you. And then I have a few from Allison. And her first one is, could we expedite building pickleball in the additional court space? The 4 courts are always busy and driving around town finding a court will be a challenge. And then she also commented, maybe switch funding from something else to enable the 4 tennis courts and 2 pickleball courts. And then she had questioned, did you check with the PR Park District if they think 3 courts will be sufficient to run the tennis classes?
I think I'll take this one. Great comments. And I think that, as we look at our capital budget and try to balance all the other needs of the district, we will consider, the board will consider and the staff will consider a recommendation of, expanding that now if we can swing it with our available capital funds. And, it's a big puzzle every year trying to fit everything in, but certainly we understand the comments and respect them, and we'll look at that. The tennis classes, and April, you can jump in if I don't cover this, but we did have Jim Dehue, who's our athletic supervisor, is on this planning committee. And as a matter of fact, we discussed that recently, and he did say that the tennis classes can be accommodated on the 3 courts because we do know that that's where the majority of Park District classes are held.
Then I have a question from Lawrence. How do the answers provided to the questions posed to us tonight affect the priorities established moving forward?
I think that they will be, it's all a piece of the process. And so we understand that, this is a sampling of who is available tonight. And, we did not make a point of, the most votes is who's going to get the amenities. So I think we'll take it all into account and use it as we look at the whole picture. So I don't know if that answered your question, but they'll be considered, but they're not going to be the end all be all, is how I would put that.
Okay, and then I have a couple from Cindy. Part of it, so we don't need to address. She says, I agree that the courts are full, so would prefer if they did not put in pickleball if possible. Thank you for having this meeting. And also, I think the overall plan looks great. While my kids are now in college, I really do like the focus on the park and the building on younger kids. I think the small size makes it cozy for small kids and safer as well. Thank you, Cindy. Glenn has sent us 2 questions. The first one is, do the 2 pickleball courts make it more likely to get the grant approved? And then the second question, what will happen if the grant does not get approved?
I can maybe address the helping question. So OSLID, as we mentioned at the beginning, we kind of use the 5 as a magic number of how many elements, but the more we can add, it is favorable. So pickleball and tennis would be considered like pickleball would be considered a new amenity to the park. So that would be viewed favorably.
And to answer the question about what if we don't get the grant, the 2 items that we had in the budget, and we'll have to look at the dollars that we allocated for each of these 2 elements, plus there's some money in there for the parking lot, probably not the extent that what we need. We did budget for a playground, so most likely we would go forward with that. And the tennis court resurfacing was also in the budget. So those are the elements that would happen right away. And then, as I said, it would be great to have the master plan, and we'll keep going back for the grants. I don't want to give too much hope, but the allowable amount for grant funding has doubled this year. So that's why we jumped on this right away, and we did not want to miss opportunity for our community. So we will remain hopeful on that.
Okay, the next question is from Erica. Will the playground have trees for shade?
We are intending to keep the existing trees out there. It is a tight space, so we haven't really looked at adding more within that playground space, but we are going to try to keep as much shade as we can.
Right, and then when we design and pick features of the playground, we can consider other shade at that time from non-tree sources. Our next comment. Sorry,
I'll just add to that, if the people interested in the playground design, which I'm sure there are many, we will come back to the public at that time with different options, as we always do with our playgrounds, and have the public pick the option that you like best for the playgrounds.
Okay. Next is from James. He says, thank you very much for hosting the meeting tonight and listening to feedback. I grew up in this community and glad to have moved back here to raise my kids. Thanks, James. Next is Robert. Respectfully, a 25% reductions in tennis courts is not an improvement. Pickleball courts should be an addition, not as a cut to current tennis capacity. Sarah has commented, I feel like 4 courts for tennis is the minimum needed. Hinckley is always full with league play, and South Park is the only space to play. Woodland is still under construction. We need to expand or keep equal, not reduce. Thank you. Allison commented resurfacing 4 courts with a question mark. Dustin had written, what plans for future building upgrades? Apologies if it's already been covered. Joined late. Does somebody want to touch on that again? I think Gail, you had answered it.
Sure. Yes, the building right now, we were not addressing because these are outdoor recreation elements for the grant. And we have put money in for, the interior of that building, up, mainly upstairs, the flooring, the blinds. Terry, you can jump in if there's been the lighting, but we
New
do hear
windows.
you. The what? The new windows?
New windows, yep.
New windows. I believe that was a couple of years ago. So we did make some upgrades. We hear you. It's an old building. It is structurally sound. And we hear the part tonight. We heard about bathrooms and the hallways as maybe something we can look at as well.
Lawrence commented, looking at the vision mission of the park district, it seems the needs of all ages would be served with a combo of tennis and pickleball. Diane has a question about the playground. What material is being suggested for the playground? The material at Prospect Park reflects an enormous amount of heat.
The playground surfacing material is 2 types, actually. It is the poured in place rubber surfacing for the majority of it, which is what we have at Prospect. And then under the swing area, we would be looking at wood chips.
Terry, are we sure she's talking about the surface? Is that what was mentioned?
Yes.
The surface. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, we've had a lot of feedback on people, requesting and suggesting that we install that whenever we do playgrounds. So that was our planned direction here.
I have another question from Allison. Sorry, if the grant doesn't get approved, is the plan to resurface 4 courts versus doing 3 plus pickleball?
I don't think that's been determined yet. We'll take, like I said, the feedback, we'll talk to the board. So we have not determined that at this point.
Okay. John, I guess, has a comment for me. Is this, why are you not responding to everyone's question? You have not made a comment to numerous questions. I thought some of them seemed more like statements than questions, but I'm sorry. I'm not allowed for responses. Somebody jump in if I seem to be skipping, waiting for an answer, okay? Glenn stated, or questioned, the cracks at the tennis courts at South Park are deep and extensive. Will a resurface fix the problem, or do they need to be torn out and replaced?
We think that that the condition of them would allow for us to use some crack repair techniques as part of the resurfacing. But obviously those are things that we'll have to dig into further as we're continuing along with construction documentation. But that is our expectations.
Okay. Next is from Lauren. She said, love the addition of washrooms closer to the playground and splash pad. Thank you from a mom of 2 young children. Krista says, the wood chips under the swings always get, says dug out, I think it was supposed to be, and make it hard for my small kids to get on the swings. Are you married to the idea of wood chips under swings? At Brickton and JC, it's such a problem. It's great the way it's laid out at Prospect. Somebody want to address? That was a question.
I don't I mean, we're not married to the idea. We're looking at that from a maintenance perspective as well as a budget perspective. The rubber surfacing has a pretty significant cost to it. And you know, they do get raked back by staff regularly, but I agree. I know they do get kicked out. But you know, in the same fashion, when we have swings moving over those areas, then the rubber gets damaged underneath the swings, and so a lot of times we avoid having that because then it's a costly replacement of the rubber surfacing under just the swings, which would have to happen prior to the rest of the playground. But you know, as the budget moves along and as we are looking for additional feedback from people on the playground specifics, we can certainly make a note to revisit that and see how or if that could fit within our budget.
Okay. I have a couple from Benjamin. The first one is for the pavilion addition, has there been discussion about water fountain with the water bottle filling station? And then his other was also the changing stations in both male and female bathrooms, please. Liz, did you want to mention the water bottle?
Yes, there is, sorry, I forgot to mention it earlier. There is an existing drinking fountain that we do have proposed to be replaced with a accessible drinking fountain with a bottle filler on it. And we did also discuss changing tables in the restrooms. And that's definitely something we can add.
And I'm going to add in that the bathrooms aren't going to be designated male or female. They're going to be single stall, single unit, so it could be either sex. And I have a question from Lawrence. Are there any other parks that can accommodate tennis courts or pickleball courts?
We haven't really approached this as an evaluation of our entire park system to identify what other parks could support those amenities at this time. The purpose of this exercise in this meeting was to look at specifically the master planning of this park. We do have multiple locations across town that have existing tennis and some pickleball, as well as a pickleball court, so that are under construction at Woodland Park right now. So.
Okay, now I'm going to jump to the raised hands because we have a couple. The first one is Lauren. Lauren, I've unmuted you, so you could unmute yourself to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry. I typed in my thought instead, so I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, then I did get one more typed comment from Erica. She said, I agree with the previous commenter that the rubber surface at Prospect Park Playground gets too hot. If it's cheaper to maintain and better for groundwater penetration, I'd much rather have wood chips at the playground. How will the final decision for rubber versus wood chips be made?
Well, we'll have to have some more internal discussions within the park district. I have to tell you that this is a new twist to this conversation about rubber surfacing, because quite honestly, it goes typically the other direction of people really urging us to consider rubber surfacing for the whole playground because you know, it's less messy, it's, you know, things like that. So this is new and great feedback for us to put down in our notes, consider.
And I think that to expand on that, that we will be having meetings specifically on the playground. So there'll be additional meetings for the public to comment on that subject as well after we, as Terry said, evaluate that further based on these comments.
Erica added in then that the rubber breaks apart and my son picks it up. And then Lee jumped in and wrote a comment that another vote for wood chips. We need to cut back on our plastic rubber consumption in our parks.
I did want to just add in, if I could, one thing about the rubber is that it is an extremely accessible surfacing, which is what kind of brought it into the forefront over wood chips. As some commenters had mentioned, when wood chips move around, they can really impact accessibility. Rubber is completely permeable. It's just as permeable as wood chips. So in case that is a concern. And one of the other items about port in place is it's less maintenance on a daily basis, because you don't have to worry about that raking back the mulch as much. So just wanted to mention a couple of those things about the surfacing.
From Brooke, she wrote, if the 3 tennis courts are being used for lessons, there is no open court for other players under this plan. Somebody address the lessons. Yeah.
April, can you address the timing on the lessons? I don't think they're there all the time. I know that.
No,
And do they use all 3 courts?
They do sometimes, but not all the time. And we usually try and keep one court open for the public for tennis as well. So that would still be the case.
So if we only had 3 tennis courts, we would only use 2 for lessons in this case.
Right. Or have pickleball lessons as well. That was one of the discussions we had.
Sarah had commented, I would love to also see a basketball court added in the added space. What is the plan for parking? Sorry if I missed the conversation. Could somebody touch on the parking and that could be addressed?
The parking resurfacing, renovation of the existing lot is a future consideration. It's not currently included in the OSLAD submittal. So an IDNR doesn't like paying for parking.
Dustin commented, I'd vote in favor of rubber surfacing. Benjamin said the rubber has been really good for young toddlers and small children. The wood chips have been difficult for little kids at other parks. And then Krista said another vote for rubber surface. I've already been to the ER 3 times for my kids because of wood chips in the eyes. Erica commented, thanks for the info, Liz. It's nice to hear the reasoning behind the park design choices. Oh, sorry. Then it said you don't need to read it out loud. So I'm reading as they're coming. Sarah commented, are we adding parking? The drawing looks like spaces are being removed. We forgot to draw them in on that last aisle again.
Yep, sorry about that, guys. No, the intent is not to change the parking configuration from what it is now.
From Robert, is there a plan to fix the fencing around the tennis courts? Right now, the tennis courts are covered with broken black zip ties that break off the blackout covering. This is a major slip hazard on the courts.
Yeah, the fencing replacement is considered as part of the project. And we would replace it with new windscreens. We do those black zip ties are specifically engineered and different at the bottom of that of those windscreens versus the top, so that if we get heavy winds, they're designed to actually break away at the bottom, but hold tight at the top so that it doesn't have an excessive wind load that then damages the fencing and renders the tennis courts useless. So it is specific, but I will remind my staff that they need to pick up the zip ties when and if they break apart and look at that. But also feel free, if you notice that they're blowing away and they need repairs, please reach out to us and let us know at the Park District here. So, but they are engineered to do that.
Okay. I am caught up. I don't have anybody raising their hands, and I do not have any comments typed in right now. So we'll give it a one last call. If you do have a comment, use the raise your hand function. I do. Lauren, you could speak.
Yeah, this is the first I've learned about kind of the love for both pickleball and tennis. I personally play tennis, and I do know that my son has taken lessons over there, and it was always nice to have an extra court to play on while the lessons were going on. There was always that accessibility. And I was just wondering, and you probably don't have this number on the top of your head, but that potential future court expansion space, what would be the cost difference in trying to build that into the plan now where you still have the 4 tennis courts, but we still incorporate the 2 pickleball courts? I know it's probably a large dollar value, which is why that wasn't presented, but I was just curious to try to help both our ballers in that regard. Thanks.
Yeah, I think, Liz, can you answer that? I know we have that number, the estimate for pickleball we looked at in that area, but just to clarify, we did want to leave it open to other things other than pickleball and tennis, but we did put a number in there, and I think for future, and it was about, do you have that, Liz?
Liz, you're muted.
Sorry, I just wanted to stop sharing so I could look that number up.
I've actually got it here, Liz.
Oh, perfect.
The 2 pickleball courts, 153,000. Does that sound right?
I was gonna say
Yeah.
about 150. Was there other part to that question or about tennis? And I think that was it, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's certainly a, prevalent topic tonight, and we'll be discussing it, as we review budgets and, look at our financial situation and balancing all the capital. So it's good to hear all the comments.
Okay, anybody else? Raise your hand. Jim O'Donnell, you could unmute yourself.
There, can you hear me?
Yes.
So actually I have to give credit where credit's due. This is my wife Marty's suggestion. There's been a lot of discussion tonight about the pros and cons of this playground surface. And maybe as you flesh this out, it would be beneficial to, if you put together a little pros and cons of each surface, and just to have that, because there is a distinct difference. There are advantages and disadvantages, and I think it would be useful for people to understand all of that. We think, Marty and I think.
Gail, you're
Great
muted.
suggestion. Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks.
Okay, we got one more comment from Susan. She said, please look at the cost of a basketball court in that expansion versus more tennis might be cheaper. Okay.
Is that it, Margaret?
Yep.
Great. These comments have been fantastic. So thank you so much. We've got it all written down. We have some more things to think about and talk with the board about. We want to thank you so much for your attendance and your input. If there's other comments that we haven't heard, any new subjects or anything, you can reach out to Terry Wolf or Jennifer Meunier, our project manager, and their information is on our website. Email or call them. The board will be, as we stated, discussing this and looking at the plan on September 15th. And we're looking to pass a resolution on that night for the grant. We have to submit it to be applicable for or to eligible for that grant. We have to put that in by the deadline is September 30th. So we will certainly look for more feedback. We'll put the plan, the proposed plan on the website so you can refer to it on our website. And we thank you so much for attending tonight.